morning. Before I start my day, I have another topic to share about. So there's two more topics that I'll feel good after I share these topics, because then they'll just be the bigger picture about how I got to where I am, like what concepts and premises am I operating with in order to achieve what I have as far as clearing my own karma. So this topic is about, I wanted to mention Dr. Bruce Lipton's research on epigenetics. Now, I have mentioned Dr. Bruce Lipton quite a bit over the years, especially if you used to be friends with me on Facebook. By the way, if you used to be friends with me on Facebook, I just don't use Facebook for people anymore, so I unfriended everybody and just use my page called Spiritual Conversations with Julie Mandy Teller. So you can feel free to join me there. So far, nobody's having the conversation that I want to have. So I'm not really focused there, but it's there in case, just in case, right? Dr. Bruce Lipton is a scientist. He's a doctor. And he discovered something in his research, having not been a very particular spiritually focused man. He was scientifically based. But he has a talk. He has several talks. But one's like 3 hours long, and he goes into step-by-step process, a little bit of storytelling to explain the fact that science is, first of all, based on a dogma, meaning there are false premises within the scientific world that scientists are utilizing in their calculations. So when people are looking for scientific proof, they don't realize that the premise of the scientific proof, the dogma that it's built on, is actually not true. So it's like the proof people are looking for. So that's just a funny thing. And it doesn't mean that there's no value in the scientific process and whatnot, right? Because we have to have some basis of understanding stuff, right? And it served me for the time that I understood it the way I did, and it serves me now to understand that it would be silly to limit myself by scientific proof. And that speaks to the next concept I'll talk about in the next video. Or maybe I'll tag it along to the end of this one if we have time. But I'm just going to give highlights of what Dr. Bruce Lipton is sharing, because like I said, the talk is 3 hours long. The one that I really like, he's wearing a blue shirt, and there's closed captioning on it because he's maybe in another place, like maybe there's a translator or something. I've seen it both ways. I've seen it translated, and I've seen it not translated, I believe. I don't know. So I've grasped these concepts, so I don't continue to consume his content or anything. I believe I read one of his books, or part of it. I haven't finished reading a book in so long. I've stopped reading them because I just know I won't finish. But anyway, he learned that we are being programmed by our environment, and especially up to around the age of 7, while our brain is still in the theta phase, we are being downloaded. So if you've ever had a toddler, then they're like little sponges, and whatever you say or do, they're mimicking it. And what happens is we become programmed by our environment, and the reason for this is simple. It's nature. It's that we need to be primed and prepared for the environment that we're born into. So this downloading starts in the womb. And we know that developmentally, children are affected by the environment of their mother. This is also part of his research, where, how the mother feels about herself is absolutely imprinting and affecting the development of her child. And what that means is mothers with low self-esteem, mothers with trauma, they are passing that along into the development of their child. And the child has to be prepared to survive in the environment it's born into. This is why it happens. So, it doesn't mean repair can't be done, and that's, again, the last topic that I want to share about. We'll cover things about that. But Dr. Bruce Lipton explains how, we go on and our subconscious keeps track of all the things we've learned. And our subconscious is kind of running below the surface, right? And then our consciousness, our conscious mind, can be engaged, right? Purposefully. We can think about the past, think about the future, analyze, or be in the present. And that's all with our conscious mind. And the reason why we can talk and walk is because our subconscious mind knows how to walk. We don't have to consciously think about how to walk once we've learned how to walk, right? Most of us. So the subconscious mind, very important and things like that. But what will be suppressed to the subconscious mind are, part of our operating system that we're adopting when we're children under the age of 7. And any coping mechanisms that we develop to avoid certain pains or behaviors that we've learned are not acceptable or whatever, all going to be put down into that operating system where we're not having to watch it. Dr. Bruce Lipton points out something rather important to the process because, of course, there is going to be questions. I'm just giving highlights, like I said. So if you're in your mind, you're going, well, what about this? What about this? It's watch the 3-hour presentation because I'm not going to be able to spell it out to you like he does. I've integrated and understand the concepts, and if we were having a one-on-one conversation, I would answer all those questions for you to the best of my understanding. But since this is an informative video to just tell you what kind of information I'm working with to get to where I am, here's what it is. There is some homework for you to do. But what he shows and points out is that when we fall in love and we want to be in relationship with somebody that we love or we admire, whatever it is, that's when our conscious mind kind of takes over the most and will be on our best behavior. And we will consciously be picking out our clothes and consciously be choosing our words and consciously be aware of how we may be being perceived. And when we are using our conscious mind to operate from, we are most like ourselves, or the version of ourselves that we want to be. But generally, the subconscious mind is running the show 95% of the time. So when we are in love and after a while we fall back into those programs, and then it's that honeymoon period can wear off if people fall back into their programs, and then all of a sudden you start seeing some sort of patterns in them and different things like this, right? Those are their coping mechanisms, and they don't see them. They don't see them because they're pushed down into the subconscious, and when their conscious mind is engaged in another way, they're not noticing them. Now, this piece of information, this understanding is why I programmed into myself to be self-aware, to inquire within myself why I was doing things. This is why. And also, this is why mirror concept is so important, because if we don't see it in ourselves, we will project it and see it in someone else. So you see how this is all tying in to the information that I've shared so far about how I've been operating and how I've been able to clear so much of my karma and just free myself back into this more authentic state of being that doesn't have like depression, worries, anxiety, or the want to die. You know, I may not be perfect. I don't have it all figured out, but like I'm actually wanting to be here on Earth, and I'm pretty excited about what comes next. And I like my life now, you know? I like the limitless possibilities that exist. It's pretty amazing to be on Earth at this time. That's a much different experience than I was having when I was programmed by my environment. Early childhood environment, you may have heard me allude to, was very violent, was scary, was a lot of manipulation and coercion and neglect and abandonment and violence and being scared of having to go without and maybe being taken care of intermittently. And so and emotional needs never really met. Okay, so those things created all the coping mechanisms and operating that I did in life. And if my environment is sort of going to exclude me and expect me to conform, then that makes me feel a way, right, about my environment or about myself. Which is it going to be? And if I have an insecure kind of self-image stemming from the environment that I was brought into and how my parents were feeling about their own selves, then when I don't quite fit in with my peers, then I'm probably going to turn against myself instead of them. You know what I mean? So that's definitely what happened. There was a lot of self-sabotage in my programming, right? Because if we don't expect to be able to succeed or to make it or to do the right thing or for things to work out for us, then we will sabotage ourselves and not even be aware of it because it's in our operating system. It's like we'll tell ourselves a story that everything's fine, but actually we are the cause of our own issues. And since we are operating, letting our subconscious run the show 95% of the time without using our conscious mind to become aware of it, we never question it, we may deny it, we just can remain oblivious to who we really are and what we are really doing and why we are doing it. So we have to develop these coping mechanisms to navigate Earth, right? To like experience what we are here to experience. It's not wrong. But when you become aware of how it works, the natural inclination would be then to utilize that information to free self from unwanted programming. You know, if you know your parents have already tried doing it the way that they're doing it and they have been miserable or, you know, whatever it may be, like, doesn't it like naturally stand to reason that you would adapt your program to not mimic exactly what they're doing, because we already know that doesn't work. You know what I mean? So also, like, for me, it wasn't that got my attention. It was that I was miserable and I couldn't really survive my own subconscious programming. It was pretty rough in there. So that brought me to surrender, and that brought me to questioning, you know? And it's been well worth questioning, right? So changing my programming, which, you know, Bruce Lipton has a website, and there are different ways of changing your programming. Habits are formed by repetition, so that's one way that we learn, repetition. But there's also energy psychology, where you can sync both sides of your brain and just sort of implement and tap in the new belief. You can neutralize the energy of the old belief to free yourself and be above it. We talk about that a lot. So basically, we're programmed up to for the first 7 years of our lives, but also if there's repetition, right? So when you see the media constantly repeating commercials, you know, like the jingles that stick in our head, the images, like All of that is done on purpose to imprint on us, because this is how humans work. So marketing experts know that this is how humans work, and they use that to their advantage. But we can use that to our own advantage as well. We can consciously decide who we are. We can consciously decide to eliminate programs that we know are not us and listen to our heart, right? And allow that. And so when I say we can decide who we are, we do have that ability, but I don't recommend definitely just like adapting, because I think that it's most ideal to get in tune with who you really are through your heart space and what your soul's intentions are. Because even if you decide you're doing something and then you say, oh, I don't want to do that, I want to do this, and then you reprogram or adapt yourself into another way of being, isn't that just another coping mechanism? And what's driving your want to do it that way? Is it a pure authentic version of you that you're wanting to adapt into, or have you taken into consideration your soul's needs and your heart's wants and things like that? Because we can adapt, or we can kind of shed, and live more present in the present moment. That all of that's possible, right? So I'm saying, like, I programmed myself to become more self-aware, meaning I adapted and I said, oh, I don't want to do it that way. I want to, every time I do something, I want to be willing to look at myself and question myself and analyze myself. Now, that's not the most authentic version of me. That was a program that I implemented into myself and utilized in order to shed all the other programs. I put a program in that would shed the other programs. But the most authentic version of me just is. There's a state of being, allowing. Doesn't need to shed, right? Isn't just full acceptance and love for me as I am, how I am in this moment and in every moment. So sometimes, adapting is a helpful thing, but I'm just explaining it this way so that you're aware of what I mean when I say that, like, I programmed myself in order to do this, but then, like, that, even that needed to be shed. So I programmed myself through repetition, right? Like, constantly doing that, and then it was second nature for me to automatically inquire within myself why I was doing what I was doing and so forth. So Dr. Bruce Lipton's information, when he first came to this understanding, it was through his stem cell research, where he had put 3 stem cells that were identical in a petri dish and changed the environment for each cell, and depending on the environment of the cell, it grew different tissue based on what it was in. And so this was a shock to him, because it didn't support the premise of DNA dictating, who and what we are. And then he goes on to explain how we can turn DNA on and off, right? That we can reprogram ourselves, that based on the level of threat or safety that we are feeling, we can turn on and off some of the cells. So things like cancer being hereditary, like, it's not true that it's hereditary through the DNA necessarily. It's actually hereditary through the environment and through the traumas that are passed on through generations. So it is more common in certain families, but it's because of that's how they have learned to cope with what that energy is. Like, obesity runs in some families, right? And you could compare a family that is obese with a family who's not obese, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the obese family is overeating. It does not always mean that. Sometimes it's just that their learned behavior through the environment was just passed on through person to person. Like this is what your body looks like, or for instance, like these teeth that I'm missing. There are 3 women in my family who are also missing those exact teeth. And this body shape, also that I'm having right now, mimics some of the women from my early childhood environment that are in my family, whom I loved and who did care for me and who were very generous with me when I was a child and things like that. I've noticed one time in one of my sisters, I noticed her mannerism mimicked that of one of our aunts that was really, really good to us when we were young, that was very generous. And so it's pretty fascinating. Like, I don't think that's something that she would know or see in herself, but I noticed, like, oh, that's that same way that my aunt stands. That's where I've seen that before. So we take on our programming from our environment, and then it's in our subconscious, so we're not aware of it. Dr. Bruce Lipton uses the example of have you ever been sitting with Bob in the kitchen, and you tell Bob that, like, boy, you're just like your father. And Bob's like, what? He's offended that you've said such a thing. But it's like Bob's not aware that in his subconscious program, he's literally has the same mannerisms as his father. And he's doing the same kind of things without even being aware of it. Because his conscious mind was busy doing something else, his subconscious mind was running the program that he was downloaded with. And so the fact that Bob's in denial of that being the case, he might see it in somebody else, but wouldn't have looked to self to see it. Of course, now I think that it's more and more common for people to be looking at themselves. I think that in the beginning for Dr. Bruce Lipton, his research was scary to other professionals because it undermined the premise of everything that they had been operating with. He had to leave his tenure at the university where he was teaching doctors to be doctors because he realized that they were teaching them based on false premises. And he was shunned by his community of other doctors because that meant that everything that they were doing and everything that they knew was not true and not right. And they were not willing to give up on what they had established thus far, right? Which is tragic, right? It's tragic. But there's a lot of other factors in it, right? Because like the prescription, the pharmaceutical industry has integrated itself into the practice of medicine and actually like gives incentives to doctors for prescribing medication. And, now we're getting into the ethics of doctors, and I think that this younger generation has given us a lot of doctors who are like, whoa, this system is not right. This isn't working because the bureaucracy of the system is detracting from the care of the patients, and that's not okay. And I agree, that is not okay, especially since we really are self-healing beings, that the information has been widely suppressed and denied in favor of industries that would like to make money on patients. So, with that being said, Dr. Bruce Lipton, kind of had to like leave his profession. He's still a doctor and all that, like no one took his license or anything, but like because this industry had been corrupted, the truth was attacked within this industry in that level of density that was happening at the time. So now it's been a matter of like people living out the truth and being examples of what it is to be the truth so that the truth could have this leg to stand on and that the lie will crumble now, right? Because we see this happening with the new influx of doctors that are just leaving the profession because they've realized the corruption and the fact that there are not enough nurses to go around and all this kind of stuff and that thing where they kind of berated us with this idea that we should be getting injected and so forth, and used fear to drive that. In itself, a lot of people became awake to the agenda at that time. Not everyone, and that's okay. But a lot of people could see this is an agenda. This is an agenda. And So that whole situation was helpful in breaking up the lies, right? So the thing is that when we are operating on fear, um, and fear is the predominant thing here, then it's natural that those subconscious defense mechanisms jump in, right? So fear can really blind people. Um, and there are a lot of fears programmed into the society and the culture and the environment on purpose, in a way, to just keep people docile and controllable. And that's not going to be the way it's going to be going forward. You know, the script has been flipped, and things are coming into balance, and it's time for the things built on lies to crumble, and we are ready. Just one of the benefits of doing readings at events sometimes is that I'll get exposed to some of our younger generation, and it's so heartwarming and beautiful when I get to do that, because I get reminded that we're going to be okay, that this younger generation gets it, that there's a lot of very high-level spiritual souls who understand and are willing to be their authentic selves, and that they're coming in with energy that will propel them into solution-oriented experiences, right? So we are well on our way into this evolution, and it's happening in a way that we're not going to have to suffer too much as a whole, right? Like, some things, it's not going to be easy all the time, but we're going to be okay. And I'm not saying that, you know, we won't lose people or whatever, because, like, I don't know what other people's souls are here for, right? Like, because if a soul doesn't decide to stay for this part, like, and stays in the dense programs, like, I think it would be rather hard for them to survive this next leg of our journey, because the discomfort that comes with holding on to the illusion and the fear programs is probably a very great discomfort. So I think it's wonderful that we have this younger generation ready to implement and develop solutions. And I think it's wonderful that we have a lot more examples of people who are living with the truth. And the truth is that we are self-healing beings, that we can engage a healing process within our own selves. Things that stop that are fear, are disbelief, are resistance, are wanting to be a victim to be cared for, are trying to fit in, are being in denial. Those things will all keep us and stop us from healing. And so if you look at your own programming, or if you feel any of those ways, then you know that you have that in your program. So if you know you have those things in your program, just even a disbelief that you could heal yourself, then you're not going to be able to access the ability to do so. So do you want to look at your program, kind of thing, you know? Really just highly recommend looking at Dr. Bruce Lipton's research, because I don't think I can do it justice in this talk here, but I feel like I wanted to share this as a premise to what else I've been sharing lately, because it's really a big key part of what changed my life and what gave me the ability to reprogram myself. And when I say that, I mean, because you'll often hear me talk about how the root cause of whatever is in childhood. And this research is what shows you why that is the case. And that's because we get programmed in childhood. That the coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms are rooted to a time in childhood. Now, I am an energy reader. And these experiences that root in childhood, they leave like a little bit of a trail of an energy. And when I'm reading energy and stuff, that's like a whole little line. Like you could follow the yellow brick road right into the experience. And you could look at that energy like it's looping. Like when you don't make sense of the experience, it throws into the future for you to experience when you get more ready, right? And if you don't resolve the misunderstanding when you come to it again, then it'll be thrown again into the future. So see, the energy starts a loop, right? And these loops that go on for a long time, they're kind of dictating what the subconscious mind is doing, right? The subconscious mind is holding the space for that loop, which is taking energy. And that loop is a lot of times trauma. A lot of times the way that you're experiencing that energy again is by getting triggered. And you're triggered into the response that you had the first time that you didn't feel capable of rectifying that situation originally, which is why the coping mechanism developed, which is why the loop of energy developed. You fragmented. And sometimes when shaman do this kind of healing, they call it soul retrieval, because you're retrieving the fragmented part of your consciousness that's looping. I gotta get going because I have a whole day and I'm not nearly ready. I just rolled out of bed, basically, gone pee, and took a sip of water, and here I am. Alright, so there was something else I wanted to touch on. Okay, the fact that we're self-healing beings. So we're self-healing beings. We as humans can notice patterns. So when we have these loops, when we have a trigger, we'll notice, like, after a while, right? Like, oh, that always happens. And then, like, maybe then our conscious mind will look at it. And once our conscious mind is on the case, we have a much better chance of working this out. But if you have the knowledge of everything that I've shared, that's going to be much more helpful. And when I talk about balancing out the energy, like, these are energies, right? They're looping. This is how energy works. It's tied into an anchored spot that was programmed in the environment. Either you directly were told to behave in a certain way, or you decided that you needed to because of an overwhelm and misunderstanding or a trauma. It's like that's where it's all rooted back to. So when we see somebody acting a certain way, what they are showing us is their programs, right? And if you're just going through life and you don't realize that that's what is happening here amongst your peers and society and you, then you won't make that step of putting the dots together. But like when I read somebody's energy, their behaviors are also telling me a layer about their energy, right? Now, if you've had my readings, then you know that my readings predominantly go for the subconscious. Because it's like that's where the juicy stuff is. That's where the stuff that's going to be valuable for you is. But like if you're behaving in a certain way, I also know that's part of your program. Like if that person over there is reactive because of something small happening, I know something in their program. That's their coping mechanism. That's a trigger that they just had. Like I can observe this in people, right? Because I understand how people work, how we're programmed, how we need to have an operating system. Because like, don't get me wrong, if we didn't have any of these things, then we wouldn't do anything. Like you got to have something, right? Because even the person who is being most authentic and just being, they have to at least allow themselves to take action from their inspiration, right? There's at least going to be that level of program. Okay, so the last topic that I'm going to talk about next time, we'll just make this a short and sweet one, and I will probably go throughout my day and think of things that I forgot to mention, but I'm just going to get this out there now. The last topic is going to be on more on healing, but healing on a quantum level. So I'm going to share with you stories that I've shared before about instant healing that I've assisted in other people, and how I do that, and why that can't be used in every instance by me, and why it kind of just shows that the experiences that we're having here are also something that we are meant to experience, right? Because the quantum field is intelligent, and if you need to have an experience, like, you're not necessarily going to be spared from that experience by quantum healing, because there's a divine intelligence that's orchestrating it. And if you need that experience, like, gosh, I hope you get it. I don't want you to be robbed of it, you know? All right, so we will talk about quantum healing in the next one. I'll see you then.